A forgotten church abandoned for decades. Ancient biblical texts hidden beneath a rural altar. One humble farmer's desperate $250 auction bid to save his family's legacy. This is the extraordinary true story of how Noah Coleman's spontaneous purchase of a dilapidated country church uncovered religious artifacts that would transform not just his struggling farm, but an entire community's connection to history. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The rooster's crow came far too early for Noah Coleman's liking. Though he'd already been awake for hours calculating how many more months his family farm might survive. At 42, the third-generation farmer showed every line of the past 3 difficult years: the devastating drought, the equipment failures, and the mounting debts that seemed to multiply despite his relentless work ethic. The small farmhouse in Ridgewood Valley had been his grandparents' pride, passed down through generations. Now, with the bank threatening foreclosure in just 5 weeks, Noah faced the unthinkable prospect of losing everything his family had built over nearly a century. Noah stared at the family photos lining his weathered oak mantel. Happier times when the fields yielded abundant harvests and stability wasn't a question that kept him awake at night. Just 35 more days, he whispered to himself, counting the dwindling time before the bank would reclaim not just the house but the 80 acres that had defined his family for generations. He pulled on his worn work jacket and moved to the kitchen to start coffee, careful not to wake his father just yet. The kitchen table was covered with loan rejection letters, foreclosure notices, and equipment repair estimates far beyond his means. Between them sat a printed auction notice he'd been studying obsessively since yesterday: St. Matthew's Church, a small stone structure at the edge of town being sold by the county for back taxes. The starting bid was remarkably low, just $250, reflecting the county's eagerness to offload the long vacant property that had fallen into disrepair after its congregation dwindled to nothing over 20 years ago. "Morning, son," said Edward Coleman, Noah's 78-year-old father, appearing in the doorway with sleep-tousled gray hair. Despite his age, he still insisted on helping with the lighter farm chores, unwilling to accept that his body couldn't keep pace with his determination. "More rejection letters?" he asked, eyeing the papers scattered across the table. "Just exploring all our options, Dad," Noah replied quickly, sliding the church auction notice beneath a stack of bills. No need to share his wild consideration of spending their last $250 on an abandoned church that could either provide salvation through potential resale or complete their financial ruin. As Edward helped prepare a simple breakfast of toast and eggs, Noah's phone chimed with a text from his brother James. "Any luck with the bank?" "Sarah said you can stay with us in the city if needed," Noah sighed. Moving to his brother's cramped city apartment would mean abandoning the farm completely, selling off what equipment remained, and admitting total defeat. He couldn't bear the thought. Not yet. Not without exploring every possible avenue to maintain the Coleman family legacy. After helping his father with his morning medications, Noah sat at his laptop, updating yet another loan application. His farming operation had once been modestly successful, supplying organic produce to local restaurants and farmers markets with growing demand. Then the 3-year drought hit, followed by equipment failures they couldn't afford to repair properly. Now, with minimal crop yields and maxed-out credit, the numbers only moved in one direction. Another 2 months without a miracle would leave them homeless. Noah's eyes drifted back to the auction listing: St. Matthew's Church, built in 1892, sitting on a half-acre lot just outside town limits. The minimum bid of $250 was almost suspiciously low, even considering its dilapidated condition. In better times, he would have recognized it as an opportunity for renovation and resale. In his current circumstances, it seemed more like a desperate gamble with money he couldn't afford to lose. Noah had never considered himself impulsive. Before the drought, he'd been a meticulous planner, carefully managing crop rotations and equipment maintenance. But circumstances had stripped away those securities one by one, leaving him with dwindling options and increasing desperation. At noon, Noah drove to his meeting with the bank manager, passing St. Matthew's Church on his way. The once proud structure sat behind an overgrown lawn, its stone walls still solid, but windows boarded up after years of neglect. The distinctive stained glass window above the entrance remained intact, though coated with dust and grime. Despite its abandonment, the church retained a certain dignity, the craftsmanship of another era still visible in the detailed stonework and elegant arched doorway. Noah pulled over, studying the property more carefully. According to local history, St. Matthew's had been built by the original settlers of Ridgewood Valley, a testament to their faith and community spirit. The property had served as a spiritual center for generations until modern life and declining rural population had rendered it obsolete. The county had maintained minimal upkeep until budget cuts forced them to auction it off to the highest bidder. As Noah contemplated the church, his phone rang. The bank manager he'd just met with. "Mr. Coleman, I've reviewed your application thoroughly, but I'm afraid we can't extend additional credit given your current financial situation. Your existing loans are already at risk of default." The rejection was politely worded but devastating. Nonetheless, the third such call this month. Noah ended the call and stared at the church, a wild idea taking shape. The auction was tomorrow. His savings would cover the minimum bid, with perhaps $100 left for immediate repairs. It was reckless, almost certainly foolish. The reasonable voice in his head listed all the reasons this was a terrible idea: the unknown repair costs, difficulty of reselling a church in a rural area, the risk of sinking their last resources into a money pit with no escape. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Yet something about the church called to him. Perhaps its resilience despite years of abandonment, or maybe just the desperate hope that he could acquire it cheaply, make minimal repairs, and flip it to a preservation society or developer for enough profit to save the farm. Noah arrived at his afternoon appointment with the farm equipment repair service distracted, his thoughts repeatedly returning to St. Matthew's Church. The mechanic asked routine questions about the tractor's issues, and Noah provided automatic answers while internally calculating how much it might cost to replace a century-old church roof. That evening, after helping his father to bed, Noah researched everything he could find about the property. St. Matthew's had once been the heart of the community, hosting weddings, funerals, and holiday celebrations for the entire valley. According to one local history blog, a famous theologian had once visited in 1927, though details were scarce. Noah scrolled through the county's disclosure documents: water damage in the chapel, electrical systems that would need complete replacement, a partial roof collapse over the back office. Each item should have deterred him, yet the extraordinarily low asking price kept drawing him back. "This is insane," he whispered to himself, closing his laptop around midnight. Yet as he drifted to sleep, Noah found himself picturing the church, restored to its former glory, imagining how it might look with fresh paint and repaired stonework, and most importantly, how its sale might just save the farmland his grandfather had worked so hard to build. The next morning, Noah drove to the county courthouse where the auction would take place. He had no experience with property auctions, had done none of the proper inspections, and was operating purely on instinct, something the old Noah would never have done. 6 people gathered in the small auction room: a representative from a demolition company looking for salvage materials, a developer interested in the land value, and Noah, clutching his checkbook with sweaty palms and a racing heart. When the bidding opened at $250, Noah raised his number immediately. The developer countered, A round of increases followed, each one causing Noah's anxiety to spike. Finally, he offered $475, nearly everything he had. After a tense silence, the auctioneer's gavel fell. Sold to bidder number 3. In a daze, Noah completed the paperwork, wrote the check that represented almost all of his remaining financial security, and received a set of keys to a property he had never even entered. By afternoon, he was legally the owner of St. Matthew's Church, either his salvation or his final financial disaster. What Noah Coleman couldn't possibly know as he drove home to tell his father about his impulsive purchase was that beneath the worn wooden altar of St. Matthew's Church lay a hidden vault, sealed for over 7 decades, containing what appeared to be ancient biblical manuscripts that would later be identified as previously undiscovered portions of the Dead Sea Scrolls, artifacts that scholars had thought lost to history forever. Noah Coleman stood at the bottom of the crumbling stone steps of St. Matthew's Church, keys clutched tightly in his hand, wondering if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. The afternoon sun illuminated the building's neglect more starkly. Then he remembered from his drive-bys, crumbling mortar between stones, rotting wood around window frames, and what appeared to be a family of raccoons watching suspiciously from the bell tower. "You bought a church?" Edward asked, his expression a mixture of confusion and concern as he stood beside his son, leaning heavily on his walking cane. Noah had picked up his father immediately after the auction, unable to delay sharing the news of his dramatic investment. "I did," Noah confirmed, trying to inject confidence into his voice. "It needs work, obviously, but the structure is solid stone. These walls have stood for over a century. With some repairs, we could sell it to a developer or preservation group for enough to save the farm." Edward shook his head slowly, though a glimmer of admiration showed in his eyes. "Your grandfather would have called this a fool's errand or a stroke of genius, and he wouldn't know which until it played out." He began carefully ascending the steps, moving toward the boarded-up entrance. "Well, let's see what $475 bought. U.S. Noah tested each step carefully as he followed his father, the stone still solid despite decades of neglect. The heavy wooden door, once undoubtedly impressive with its hand-carved panels and iron hardware, now hung slightly askew on corroded hinges. It took 3 attempts with different keys before the tumblers finally shifted with a rusty groan. The door swung inward, releasing a musty wave of stale air that spoke of years of abandonment. Noah fumbled for his phone's flashlight, illuminating a modest sanctuary that, beneath layers of dust and cobwebs, hinted at the church's former simple beauty. Wooden pews lined both sides of a central aisle leading to a raised altar platform. Sunlight filtered weakly through the boarded windows, catching motes of dust dancing in the beam of Noah's flashlight. "Been a while since I've been in here," Edward commented, his voice echoing slightly in the empty space. "Your grandmother and I were married right there." He pointed toward the altar with a nostalgic smile. 1962. Half the county showed up. Over the next hour, father and son conducted a careful exploration of the church's main floor. Despite obvious water damage in several areas, the building's structural elements appeared surprisingly sound. The stone walls had protected the interior better than Noah had expected, and the craftsmanship of another era, high ceilings hand-carved, woodwork, and stained glass that remained mostly intact behind protective boards, suggested that his impulsive purchase might not have been completely irrational. "The electricity's been disconnected," Noah noted, testing a light switch without result. "And I'm not touching any plumbing until we have someone check the pipes. We'll need to bring lanterns tomorrow when we start cleaning." As Edward examined the wooden pews, musing about which families had sat where during his childhood, Noah moved toward the altar area. Unlike the ornate altars of larger churches, St. Matthew's featured a simple wooden table, beautifully carved but showing significant wear. Behind it stood a wooden cross against the back wall, and to one side, a small door that presumably led to storage or preparation areas. Noah ran his hand along the altar's edge, appreciating the craftsmanship despite years of neglect. His fingers detected a small irregularity, what felt like a seam that didn't match the wood grain pattern. Crouching down, he directed his flashlight beneath the altar, revealing what appeared to be hinges on the backside, hidden from casual view. "Dad, come look at this," Noah called, excitement creeping into his voice. "I think there's some kind of compartment built into the altar." Edward made his way slowly to the front, leaning heavily on his cane. Churches often had secure storage for communion vessels or important documents, he noted as Noah continued his examination. The hinges were tarnished but intact, suggesting a compartment or drawer built into the altar's base. Noah felt along the edges until his fingers found a small, almost invisible keyhole on the underside. "It's locked," he said, disappointment evident in his tone. "Check the keys they gave you," Edward suggested. Churches typically kept everything together. Noah retrieved the ring of keys, trying several before finding the small, ornate key that slid perfectly into the lock. With a surprisingly smooth motion, it turned, and a section of the altar's front panel clicked open, revealing a hidden compartment about 2 feet square. Inside lay what appeared to be a metal box, roughly the size of a small suitcase, tarnished with age but intact. The box itself was secured with another lock, more elaborate than the first. "What do you think it is?" Noah asked, carefully lifting the unexpectedly heavy container from its hiding place. "Church records maybe, or communion equipment." Edward shook his head, a look of concentration on his weathered face. "I don't recall anyone ever mentioning a compartment in the altar, and I served as an altar boy here for years." He ran his hand over the box's surface, wiping away decades of dust to reveal intricate engravings, symbols that didn't immediately appear to be Christian iconography. "This is unusual," he murmured. None of the remaining keys fit the box's lock, and after several attempts, Noah decided against forcing it open. "We should document everything properly," he said, remembering advice from a home renovation show. "Take photographs before moving or changing anything." As the daylight began to fade and the church interior grew increasingly dim, Noah carefully replaced the box in its compartment. "We'll come back tomorrow with better lighting and tools," he promised his father. "And maybe we can ask Pastor Williams if he knows anything about a hidden compartment in the altar." A sharp knocking at the front door startled them both. Noah moved cautiously toward the entrance, aware they were technically trespassing by some standards. The property was legally his, but they hadn't officially closed with the county yet, which would take another week according to the paperwork. He opened the door to find an older woman standing on the steps, a basket in her hands. "I saw someone finally showing interest in the old church," she said, smiling warmly. "I'm Martha Hendricks. I live just down the road. Welcome to St. Matthew's." The unexpected neighborly gesture caught Noah off guard. "Thank you. I'm Noah Coleman, and this is my father, Edward. We're not actually moving in," he added quickly, "just assessing what we've gotten ourselves into." Martha laughed understandingly. "A significant project to be sure. I've watched this beautiful old place deteriorate for years. We're thrilled someone's saving it from demolition. Those developers wanted to tear it down for a gas station, you know." She offered the basket, which contained freshly baked bread and preserves. "Just a little welcome gift. Thought you might need sustenance for your work." Noah invited Martha inside, grateful for any local insight into the property. The older woman moved through the sanctuary with familiar ease. "I was baptized here," she explained. "My parents were married here too. Such a central part of the community for so long." She paused, gazing toward the altar. "This church has stories, Mr. Coleman, remarkable stories." "It's just Noah," he corrected gently. "And honestly, we're here because it was what I could afford, not for the historical value. Our farm is facing foreclosure, And I'm hoping to renovate and sell this place for enough to save it. Martha nodded sympathetically. Life takes unexpected turns. Still, you might find the history of this place quite valuable. St. Matthew's wasn't just a simple country church. There were rumors for years about important religious artifacts being stored here during the Second World War. Noah's interest peaked immediately. Religious artifacts like what? No one knows for certain, Martha replied. Pastor Gregory, who served here from 1935 until his death in 1972, had connections to archaeological expeditions in the Middle East before the war. Local legend says he helped protect items that would have otherwise been destroyed or stolen during the conflict. She smiled at Noah's obvious interest. It's probably just stories, of course, but Pastor Gregory was certainly secretive about the altar area. Never allowed cleaning staff behind it, always locked the church when not in use. Unusual for a country church in those days. As Martha prepared to leave, she added, "If you need recommendations for contractors who won't overcharge, my son runs a construction company. And do let me know if you find anything interesting under that altar." Local historians have speculated about its contents for decades. After Martha departed, Noah and Edward continued their exploration until fading daylight made navigation hazardous without proper lighting. As they prepared to leave, Noah found himself drawn back to the altar, staring at it with newfound curiosity. Was it possible that the metal box contained something more significant than church records? Over the next 3 days, Noah orchestrated initial cleaning efforts while coordinating with utility companies and contractors. Martha Hendricks's son, Thomas, proved invaluable, connecting him with reliable workers willing to accept payment plans. The church's electrical system needed updating, but a sympathetic electrician agreed to restore power to the main sanctuary first, allowing for better working conditions while Noah assessed other areas. A week after the auction, with electricity restored and basic cleaning underway, Noah found himself alone in the church late one evening, reviewing renovation estimates by portable worklight. The numbers were daunting, tens of thousands for necessary repairs with cosmetic renovations a distant dream. As he sat contemplating their financial predicament, the metal box from the altar compartment sat before him on a makeshift work table. Noah had carefully photographed it from all angles, documenting the unusual engravings that covered its surface. His research had yielded no clear answers about the symbols, which appeared to be ancient Hebrew or Aramaic languages he couldn't read. The box's lock had resisted all conventional attempts to open it, and Noah was reluctant to damage something that might have historical significance. He was considering his options when a strange thumping sound emanated from the back of the church. Noah froze, listening intently. The noise came again, a distinct movement in what had once been the pastor's office. Armed with a flashlight and a hammer for protection, Noah approached the office door. "Hello?" he called out. "Anyone there?" No answer came, but he could hear faint movements inside. Raccoons in the rafters, he thought, remembering the family they'd spotted on their first visit. Noah pushed the door open slowly, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The small office was in worse condition than the main sanctuary, with water damage evident on the walls and ceiling. Filing cabinets stood open and empty, their contents long since removed or destroyed by moisture. The beam caught something unexpected. Footprints in the dust, fresh enough that the edges remained defined. Too small for an adult, they tracked a meandering path around the office furniture. "Hello?" Noah called again, now certain he wasn't dealing with wildlife. The flashlight beam caught movement behind the desk. Crouching there, clearly trying to remain hidden, was a boy of about 12, his expression a mixture of fear and defiance. "You're not supposed to be in here," the boy said accusingly, standing up straight as if preparing to flee. "This is our fort." "Your fort?" Noah asked, lowering the hammer and softening his tone. I think you might be confused. I just purchased this church last week. The boy's defiant stance wavered slightly. You bought the church? Nobody wants this old place. That's why we use it. We? Noah questioned, glancing around for other children. Me and my friends, the boy admitted. We found a way in through the back window months ago. We don't damage anything, he added quickly. We just play here. Sometimes when it rains. Noah studied the boy, recognizing the mix of caution and curiosity in his expression. What's your name? Michael, the boy answered after a moment's hesitation. Michael Lawson. My grandma lives down the road. Martha Hendricks's grandson? Noah guessed, remembering she had mentioned family nearby. Michael nodded. You won't tell her, will you? She thinks the church is dangerous. Well, it is dangerous, Noah confirmed. The structure needs work, and there could be fallen debris. He paused, seeing the disappointment on Michael's face. Tell you what, if you promise not to come in alone anymore, maybe you can help me with some of the cleaning and restoration. With your grandmother's permission, of course. The boy's expression brightened immediately. Really? I could help? Really, Noah confirmed. But for now I need to get you home safely. It's getting late. As they walked through the sanctuary toward the exit, Michael stopped at the altar, looking at it curiously. Did you find what's inside yet? Noah's attention sharpened. Inside? You know about the compartment? Michael nodded. We found it a few weeks ago, but we couldn't open it. There's something heavy in there. There's a metal box, Noah confirmed. I've been trying to figure out how to open it without damaging anything. My friend's dad is a locksmith, Michael offered. Maybe he could help? The suggestion was surprisingly practical. Noah made a mental note to follow up as he escorted Michael to Martha's house, explaining the situation while carefully omitting the details about the children's fort. Martha was understanding but firm about safety concerns, making Michael promise to only visit with proper supervision. The following day, Noah contacted Michael's friend's father, Daniel Reeves, the only locksmith in Ridgewood Valley. Daniel agreed to examine the box that weekend, his curiosity piqued by Noah's description of the unusual lock mechanism. Saturday morning found Noah, Edward, Daniel Reeves, and an eager Michael gathered around the work table where the metal box sat. Daniel examined it with professional interest, his specialized tools laid out beside him. This is extraordinary craftsmanship, he commented, studying the lock. Hand-forged, probably pre-industrial. Not your typical church strongbox, he pointed to the engravings. And these markings, they're consistent with artifacts from the Dead Sea region. Ancient Hebrew and Aramaic script. How do you know? That? Noah asked, surprised by the locksmith's expertise. Daniel smiled slightly. Locksmithing is my profession, but ancient languages are my passion. I studied archaeological preservation in college before returning to take over my father's business. He traced the symbols with his finger. These particular script forms are reminiscent of the Qumran Caves discoveries, the Dead Sea Scrolls. The term struck a chord in Noah's memory, something from a documentary he'd seen years ago. The biblical manuscripts found in caves in the 1940s? Exactly, Daniel confirmed. One of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. Ancient Jewish religious texts that predated Christianity, preserved in desert caves for nearly 2,000 years. Edward leaned forward, his interest visibly heightened. And you think this box has something to do with those scrolls? I wouldn't go that far, Daniel cautioned. These script forms were used for centuries. But the craftsmanship and materials suggest this box was designed specifically to protect something valuable and ancient. He selected several fine tools from his kit. Let's see what's inside, shall we? With meticulous care, Daniel worked on the lock, using techniques that seemed more appropriate for a museum artifact than a simple church storage box. After 20 minutes of careful manipulation, a soft click emanated from the mechanism. There, he said softly. It's unlocked. Noah moved closer, heart racing with anticipation as Daniel slowly lifted the lid. The interior was lined with what appeared to be lead sheeting, creating a sealed environment. Inside, wrapped in yellowed linen, lay several cylindrical objects. With extreme care, Daniel partially unwrapped one of the cylinders, revealing what appeared to be an ancient scroll, the parchment discolored with age but remarkably intact. "My God," he whispered, his professional demeanor momentarily forgotten. "These appear to be genuine ancient scrolls." Noah stared in disbelief. "Like actual Dead Sea Scrolls?" "I can't confirm that without proper analysis," Daniel said, carefully rewrapping the parchment. "But these have all the characteristics of ancient Middle Eastern manuscripts. The preservation is remarkable. The lead lining and sealed environment created perfect storage conditions." He looked up at Noah, his expression serious. "If these are authentic, they're of incalculable historical and religious significance." "How would they end up in a small church in Ridgewood Valley?" Edward wondered aloud. Martha mentioned that Pastor Gregory had connections to Middle Eastern archaeological expeditions before World War II, Noah recalled. "She said there were rumors he helped protect religious artifacts during the war." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. The timing would align with the initial Dead Sea Scroll discoveries. The first scrolls were found in 1947, but there were rumors of earlier discoveries that were kept quiet due to the political situation in British-controlled Palestine. He carefully closed the box, relocking it. "Noah, if these are authentic, you've made an extraordinary discovery, one that needs proper archaeological and scholarly attention." Noah sat back, overwhelmed by the implications. He had purchased a foreclosed church hoping to resell it for enough money to save his farm. Instead, he may have stumbled upon archaeological treasures of immense historical and religious significance. As this realization settled, a new question emerged. What exactly was he supposed to do with ancient biblical manuscripts, potentially worth millions? Daniel Reeves broke the stunned silence. "I know someone at the university, a professor of ancient Near Eastern studies. She could help authenticate these properly." Noah nodded slowly, still processing the magnitude of what they'd found. "Yes, I think that would be wise. But for now, let's keep this between us." He glanced at Michael, who was watching with wide-eyed fascination, "All of us. Until we know exactly what we're dealing with." What Noah Coleman couldn't possibly anticipate was how quickly word would spread about his discovery, or how many different parties would soon converge on St. Matthew's Church, each with their own agenda regarding the ancient scrolls hidden within. The simple wooden altar. Noah Coleman couldn't sleep that night, his mind racing with the implications of what lay hidden in the metal box. He'd purchased St. Matthew's Church hoping for a modest profit to save his family farm. Instead, he'd potentially discovered ancient biblical manuscripts that could reshape religious history. As the first light of dawn filtered through his bedroom window, Noah made a decision. Before involving outside experts, he needed to understand exactly what they were dealing with and ensure the scrolls remained secure. By 7 a.m., Noah was back at the church, carefully relocating the metal box to a more secure location, a small fireproof safe he'd installed beneath the floorboards of what had once been the pastor's office. If these were indeed authentic Dead Sea Scrolls, their value would be beyond calculation, both monetarily and historically. Such treasures would attract attention from around the world, attention Noah wasn't sure he was ready to handle. As Noah finished securing the safe, his phone rang. Daniel Reeves, the locksmith. "Noah, I've been doing some research on those markings," Daniel began without preamble. Several symbols match fragments documented from Qumran Cave 11, discovered in 1956. These particular script forms are extremely rare, associated with texts that scholars believed were lost forever. "What exactly does that mean?" Noah asked, stepping outside to ensure privacy. "It means," Daniel replied, his voice tense with excitement, that if these are authentic, they could be part of the missing collection, manuscripts rumored to have been separated from the main discoveries during the turbulent period between finding the scrolls and their formal documentation. Manuscripts that fill critical gaps in existing texts. Noah leaned against the stone wall of the church, the weight of this information settling heavily on his shoulders. How would Pastor Gregory have acquired such important artifacts? That's what makes this so fascinating, Daniel explained. According to county records, Gregory Patterson served as a chaplain in North Africa during the war, then spent 3 years in British Palestine before returning to take over St. Matthew's in 1952, right during the period when the first scrolls were being discovered and studied. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a dusty pickup truck, Thomas Hendricks, Martha's son, arriving with his construction crew to begin preliminary structural assessments. Noah quickly ended the call, promising to meet Daniel later to discuss next steps. The morning passed in a blur of activity as Thomas and his team examined the roof, foundation, and structural integrity of the old church. Despite years of neglect, the stone construction had protected the building remarkably well. "You got yourself a solid structure here," Thomas concluded. "Needs work, sure, but nothing catastrophic. These old buildings were built to last." Noah nodded, only half listening as his thoughts repeatedly returned to the hidden manuscripts. The preliminary renovation estimate Thomas provided, $47,000 for essential repairs, would normally have sent Noah into a panic given his financial situation. Today, it barely registered against the backdrop of potentially having discovered priceless historical artifacts. By early afternoon, Noah's father arrived, accompanied by Martha Hendricks, who had insisted on bringing lunch for the workers. As they shared sandwiches in the partially clean sanctuary, Martha regaled them with stories of St. Matthew's heyday, the packed Christmas services, community gatherings, and generations of families who had worshipped beneath its roof. "Pastor Gregory was always peculiar about the altar area," she mentioned casually, unknowingly touching on exactly what occupied Noah's thoughts. Especially after he returned from overseas. He installed that wooden altar himself, replaced the stone one that had been there since the church was built. Some folks thought it strange at the time. Noah exchanged a meaningful glance with his father. "Did he ever mention why?" he asked, trying to sound merely curious. Martha shook her head. "He was a private man, especially about his time overseas. There were rumors, of course. Some said he'd been involved with archaeological expeditions. Others thought he might have worked with intelligence services during the war. He never confirmed any of it." As the conversation continued, Noah noticed a black SUV driving slowly past the church for the second time that hour. Something about its deliberate pace and tinted windows triggered his caution. "Excuse me," he said, stepping outside to watch as the vehicle continued down the road. Thomas joined him, wiping sandwich crumbs from his beard. "That's the third time they've passed by today," he noted. "Not local plates, city folks probably. We've had developers eyeing this property for years." Noah nodded, though something told him this wasn't just a curious developer. The timing, just days after they'd discovered the scrolls, seemed too coincidental. "If they come back, let me know," he said, trying to mask his growing unease. By evening, when the construction crew had departed and Noah was alone in the church documenting potential renovation plans, his phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Heard you found something interesting at St. Matthew's. Artifacts from Qumran are of international importance. We should talk." Noah stared at the message, a chill running down his spine. They had been extremely careful. Only 4 people knew about the scrolls: himself, his father Daniel, and young Michael, who had solemnly promised secrecy. How had word spread so quickly? Before he could contemplate this further, a knock at the church door startled him. Through the window, Noah spotted a middle-aged woman in professional attire standing on the steps, a leather briefcase in hand. Cautiously, he opened the door. "Mr. Coleman? I'm Dr. Rebecca Weiss, Department of Near Eastern Studies at Sterling University." She introduced herself, offering a business card. "Daniel Reeves contacted me about potentially significant archaeological findings. May I come in?" Noah hesitated, studying her credentials. The university was legitimate, and Daniel had mentioned contacting an expert, but something about the timing felt rushed. "Daniel didn't mention you'd be coming today," he said carefully. "My apologies for the unexpected visit," Dr. Weiss replied smoothly. "When Daniel described what you'd found, I thought it prudent to assess the situation immediately. Artifacts of this nature require proper preservation protocols." Noah reluctantly invited her inside. Maintaining a cautious distance, Dr. Weiss surveyed the sanctuary with professional interest, her gaze lingering on the altar area. "Daniel mentioned manuscripts potentially connected to the Dead Sea Scrolls?" she prompted. "He may have been overenthusiastic," Noah deflected. "We found an old metal box with some religious texts. Nothing definitively identified yet." Dr. Weiss smiled thinly. "Mr. Coleman, if these are authentic Qumran manuscripts, they represent invaluable cultural heritage that requires immediate professional conservation. Exposure to uncontrolled environmental conditions could cause irreparable damage." "I understand the importance of proper preservation," Noah assured her. "That's why I'm proceeding carefully before making any claims about what we've found." Their conversation was interrupted by another arrival, Daniel Reeves himself, looking surprised to find Dr. Weiss already there. "Rebecca? I didn't expect you until tomorrow," he said, confusion evident in his tone. "I rearranged my schedule given the potential significance," she replied smoothly. "Better to assess sooner rather than later." Daniel looked uncertainly between Dr. Weiss and Noah. "I hope I haven't overstepped by contacting Dr. Weiss. She's the foremost expert on Dead Sea Scroll translations in the region." "Not at all," Noah assured him, though his caution remained firmly in place. "We were just discussing the importance of proper verification before jumping to conclusions." As the three continued their careful conversation, each avoiding direct mention of what exactly had been found, Noah noticed the same black SUV passing by once again, this time stopping just down the road. His unease deepened when a man in a dark suit emerged, speaking intently into a phone while watching the church. Noah excused himself momentarily, stepping outside under the pretense of checking something with the construction supplies. From this vantage point, he could see the man in the suit more clearly, official-looking, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. When the man noticed Noah watching, he quickly returned to his vehicle and drove away. Back inside, Noah found Dr. Weiss examining the altar with obvious interest. "Fascinating modification to the original design," she commented. "This wouldn't be typical for a rural church of this period." "Dr. Weiss," Noah said firmly, making a decision, "I appreciate your interest, but I'm not prepared to discuss specific findings today. Once we've properly documented everything and consulted with legal experts about the historical implications, I'll be happy to arrange a formal evaluation." The professor's professional demeanor slipped slightly, revealing a flash of frustration. "Mr. Coleman, you may not fully appreciate the historical significance or preservation requirements of ancient manuscripts. Every day they remain in improper storage risks irreparable damage." "I understand your concern," Noah replied evenly. "But as the legal owner of this property and everything in it, I need to proceed methodically. I'll be in touch when we're ready for expert consultation." After Dr. Weiss reluctantly departed, Daniel stayed behind, looking troubled. "Noah, I may have been indiscreet in my excitement. I only mentioned potential archaeological findings to Dr. Weiss, but word spreads quickly in academic circles." "And beyond," Noah added, describing the mysterious text message and the watching vehicle. Daniel's expression grew more concerned. If rumors are already circulating about Dead Sea Scroll discoveries, you can expect more visitors. The scholarly community, religious organizations, museums, private collectors, all would have intense interest in such findings. Which is exactly why we need to proceed carefully, Noah emphasized. These scrolls, if that's what they are, have remained safely preserved for decades in that lead-lined box. A few more days while we determine the best approach won't harm them. That evening, Noah called an emergency family meeting with his father at their farmhouse. Edward listened gravely as Noah described the day's concerning developments. If these scrolls are as significant as they appear, Edward finally said, they're worth millions, perhaps tens of millions. The farm could be saved many times over. It's not that simple, Noah countered. These aren't just valuable artifacts. They're potentially crucial historical and religious documents. We can't just sell them to the highest bidder. Edward nodded slowly. Your grandfather would say we've been entrusted with something greater than ourselves. The question is, what's the right path forward? Their discussion was interrupted by headlights sweeping across the farmhouse windows. Noah peered out to see the now familiar black SUV parking in their driveway. Two men in dark suits emerged, approaching the house with purposeful strides. Noah opened the door before they could knock. Can I help you gentlemen? Mr. Coleman? I'm Thomas Garrett from the International Cultural Heritage Protection Agency. The older man introduced himself, presenting official-looking identification. This is my colleague, Dr. James Morrison. We understand you've made a significant archaeological discovery at St. Matthew's Church. Noah studied their credentials carefully. I wasn't aware that archaeological discoveries on private property fell under international agency jurisdiction. Normally they wouldn't, Garrett explained smoothly. However, items of exceptional cultural and historical significance, particularly those potentially removed from their countries of origin during periods of conflict, fall under special protocols established by international convention. Noah maintained a neutral expression, neither confirming nor denying anything. I'm still assessing the historical features of the church I purchased. If I discover anything requiring international attention, I'll certainly follow proper procedures. Mr. Coleman, Dr. Morrison interjected, his tone more direct. We have credible information that manuscripts consistent with the Dead Sea Scrolls collection have been located on your property. These would represent cultural heritage of immense significance that requires immediate professional assessment and preservation. And may I ask the source of this information? Noah inquired, increasingly certain that something larger was unfolding around his modest church purchase. We're not at liberty to discuss our sources, Garrett replied. But I assure you, our only concern is ensuring proper handling of potentially invaluable historical artifacts. Edward joined them. At the doorway, his weathered farmer's presence somehow lending gravity to the moment. Gentlemen, it's getting late. My son has assured you he'll follow proper procedures if anything significant is found. Until then, we'd appreciate continuing this conversation during normal business hours. After the officials reluctantly departed, with promises to return the following day, Noah and Edward watched the SUV disappear down their long driveway. That's no international agency I've ever heard of, Edward remarked quietly. Agreed, Noah replied. Something doesn't feel right. I think we need to move the scrolls to a more secure location tonight. Within the hour, Noah had contacted Daniel Reeves, whose locksmithing business included a professional-grade vault used for storing clients' valuables. My shop has a security system that would make Fort Knox jealous, Daniel assured him. We can keep the box there temporarily, while figuring out next steps. Under cover of darkness, Noah carefully retrieved the metal container from its hiding place beneath the church floorboards. As he secured it in his truck, he noticed a sedan parked about a quarter mile down the road. Its lights off but clearly occupied. Someone was watching the church. Taking a circuitous route to avoid being followed, Noah eventually arrived at Daniel's shop on the outskirts of town. The locksmith was waiting, concern evident on his face. "This situation is escalating quickly," he observed as they transferred the box to his vault. "Too quickly for normal academic interest." "I know," Noah agreed. "Which makes me wonder what exactly is in these scrolls that's attracting so much attention." Daniel hesitated before responding. "There's something I didn't mention earlier. Some of the symbols on the box, they're not just standard ancient Hebrew or Aramaic. They include rare esoteric markings associated with texts that scholars call controversial or apocryphal religious writings, excluded from standard biblical canons because their content challenged established theological doctrines." "You mean like alternative gospels?" Noah asked, remembering documentaries about texts that offered different perspectives on biblical events. "Potentially more significant," Daniel clarified. "There have been rumors for decades about missing portions of the Dead Sea Scrolls sections that were purposely separated from the main collection because they contained information that would fundamentally challenge traditional religious narratives. Information powerful enough that various interests might go to extraordinary lengths to control or suppress it." The implications of this sent a chill through Noah. What had seemed like a straightforward, if valuable, historical discovery was rapidly evolving into something far more complex and potentially dangerous. "So what do we do now?" he asked. Daniel locked the vault with practiced efficiency. "First, we need expert authentication without creating a circus. I have a contact, a former professor who works independently authenticating ancient manuscripts. He's trustworthy and discreet." He paused, looking seriously at Noah. "Second, we need to understand exactly what these scrolls contain before deciding their fate. If they're what I suspect they might be, their contents could be more valuable than the artifacts themselves." As Noah drove home that night, his headlights cutting through the rural darkness, he noticed two vehicles following at a discreet distance, the black SUV from earlier and a new arrival, an expensive European sedan he didn't recognize. Word was spreading, and different interests were converging on Ridgewood Valley, all focused on the contents of a simple metal box he'd discovered beneath a church altar. Noah's phone chimed with an incoming text. He checked it at a stoplight. Another message from the unknown sender. "Be careful who you trust with the Qumran texts. Not all interested parties have preservation in mind. Check the parish records from 1952. Gregory Patterson didn't choose St. Matthew's by accident." The cryptic warning only deepened Noah's sense that he had stumbled into something far larger than a simple historical discovery. As he pulled into his farmhouse driveway, he spotted a figure waiting on the porch, Martha Hendricks, her expression grave in the porch light. "We need to talk about those scrolls," she said without preamble. As Noah approached, "And about why my father, Gregory Patterson, hid them in that altar 47 years ago." Noah stared at her in shock as the pieces suddenly clicked into place. Martha Hendricks wasn't just a helpful neighbor, she was Pastor Gregory's daughter. And she knew far more about the scrolls than she had initially revealed. The humble church Noah had purchased for $475 had just become the center of a rapidly expanding mystery that stretched back decades and potentially involved secrets some would go to extraordinary lengths to protect or expose. "You'd better come inside," Noah said quietly, aware that watchful eyes were monitoring his every move. "I think we have a lot to discuss." As they entered the farmhouse, Noah couldn't shake the feeling that his impulsive purchase of St. Matthew's church had set in motion events that would transform not just his own desperate financial situation, but potentially challenge fundamental understandings of biblical history, all because he'd taken a chance on a forgotten country church with a hidden vault beneath its altar. Noah ushered Martha Hendricks into the farmhouse kitchen, where Edward was already preparing tea. The revelation that Martha was Pastor Gregory's daughter had shifted everything, transforming her from kindly neighbor to key figure in the mystery surrounding the scrolls. As the kettle whistled, the three of them settled around the worn oak table that had hosted 4 generations of Coleman family discussions. "I should have been honest from the beginning," Martha began, her hands clasped tightly around her mug. "When I heard you'd purchased St. Matthew's, I wanted to see who had taken stewardship of my father's church and what might come of his hidden legacy. I never imagined you'd find the vault so quickly. Why the secrecy?" Noah asked, trying to keep accusation from his tone. "If you knew what was hidden there all along, why not tell me directly?" Martha's eyes reflected decades of careful guardianship. "Because those scrolls have already cost too many people too much. My father dedicated his life to protecting them, and I needed to be certain of your character before revealing their true significance." She reached into her handbag, removing a weathered leather journal. "This was my father's. It documents everything: how he acquired the scrolls, why he hid them, and most importantly, why certain powerful interests have sought them for decades." Noah accepted the journal with reverent care, sensing its importance. Martha continued as he examined the faded handwriting on its pages. "My father wasn't just a chaplain during the war. He served with a specialized unit tasked with recovering cultural treasures looted by Nazi forces. In 1947, he was stationed near Jerusalem when a Bedouin shepherd discovered the first Dead Sea Scrolls in caves near Qumran. The official discovery," Edward noted, his farmer's hands wrapped around his mug. "Yes, the official discovery," Martha confirmed. "But what few people know is that additional scrolls were found in a separate cave system manuscripts that never made it into the public record. My father was among the first Western scholars to examine them, and what he read changed him forever." Noah leaned forward, captivated by her account. "Changed him how?" "The manuscripts contained texts that directly contradicted established religious doctrine, not just minor discrepancies, but fundamental challenges to core theological narratives that have shaped Western civilization for 2 millennia. Martha's voice lowered. These weren't just historical curiosities. They were potentially explosive revelations that multiple religious organizations and even governments had vested interests in suppressing. Which explains the immediate attention when rumors of our discovery began circulating, Noah reasoned, thinking of the mysterious officials and Dr. Weiss's unexpected visit. Martha nodded grimly. "When my father recognized the scroll's significance, he faced an impossible choice: surrender them to authorities who would likely suppress or destroy them, or preserve them himself until humanity was ready for their revelations. He chose the latter, smuggling them out during the chaos following Israel's establishment in 1948, and he designed the altar specifically to hide them." Noah concluded, pieces falling into place. "Every detail was meticulously planned," Martha confirmed. "The lid lining to prevent deterioration, the specialized lock mechanisms, even his selection of St. Matthew's, a remote church in a declining rural community where few would think to look for priceless artifacts." Edward, who had been quietly absorbing this information, finally spoke. "Martha, you said these scrolls challenged fundamental religious doctrines. What exactly do they contain that makes them so dangerous?" Martha hesitated, weighing her response. Carefully, alternative accounts of critical biblical events. Evidence that certain cornerstone religious narratives were later additions rather than original teachings. Most significantly, texts that suggest a dramatically different understanding of divine nature than what became orthodox doctrine. Noah felt the weight of this information settling on his shoulders. What had begun as a desperate financial gamble had transformed into a profound ethical dilemma with far-reaching implications. "So what happens now?" he asked. "These scrolls have been hidden for decades. What would your father want us to do with them?" "That's why I brought his journal," Martha replied, tapping the leather-bound book. His final entries outline his hope that someday, When the world was ready, the scrolls would be shared, not controlled by any single religious or governmental authority, but made available to humanity as a whole. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of vehicles approaching outside. Through the kitchen window, Noah spotted 3 cars pulling into the farmhouse driveway, the black SUV from earlier. Dr. Weiss's sedan and a new arrival, an imposing black limousine with diplomatic flags. "They're moving faster than I anticipated," Martha murmured, concern etching her features. "They must have more information than I realized." Noah quickly moved to his father's gun cabinet, removing his hunting rifle. He had no intention of using it, but its presence might discourage overly aggressive visitors. "Dad, take Martha to the back bedroom. Call Daniel and tell him what's happening." "I'll handle this." Edward hesitated, reluctant to leave his son alone. "Noah, please, Dad," Noah interrupted firmly. "If these people are willing to show up unannounced at night, we need to be cautious. And someone needs to protect Martha and contact Daniel." As Edward and Martha retreated deeper into the house, Noah positioned himself on the front porch, rifle held non-threateningly but visibly at his side. From the vehicles emerged 5 individuals: Thomas Garrett and Dr. Morrison from the supposed International Cultural Heritage Protection Agency, Dr. Rebecca Weiss from the university, and 2 new figures exiting the limousine, a distinguished older man in formal attire and a younger woman in business clothing. "Mr. Coleman," Garrett called out, noting the rifle with visible concern, "I assure you, there's no need for weapons. We're simply here to discuss the artifacts." "It's nearly midnight, Mr. Garrett," Noah replied evenly. "Civilized discussions happen during daylight hours with proper appointments. Whatever you're seeking can wait until morning." The distinguished man from the limousine stepped forward. "Mr. Coleman, I am Dr. Elias Haroun, cultural attaché from the Israeli consulate. These manuscripts may constitute significant cultural heritage of the State of Israel. We request the opportunity to authenticate them immediately." Noah's grip on the rifle tightened slightly. "With all due respect, Dr. Haroun, I've made no public claims about finding any manuscripts. Yet somehow, within days of purchasing a foreclosed church, I have international officials, university professors, and now diplomatic representatives converging on my property. That suggests either remarkable coincidence or troubling surveillance." Dr. Weiss stepped forward, her academic demeanor giving way to urgency. "Mr. Coleman, these aren't just artifacts, they're irreplaceable historical documents that require specialized preservation. Every moment they remain in improper storage risks permanent damage." "And how exactly do you know what condition they're in, Dr. Weiss?" Noah countered. "Since, according to you, you haven't seen them yet." The impasse might have continued, but was interrupted by the arrival of another vehicle, Daniel Reeves's pickup truck, with Daniel himself accompanied by an elderly man Noah didn't recognize. They approached the gathering with purposeful strides. "Noah," Daniel called out, "I brought Professor Abrams. He can help sort this situation." The assembled officials turned toward the newcomers with evident recognition and, in some cases, visible discomfort. Professor Samuel Abrams, despite his advanced age and slight frame, carried himself with unmistakable authority. "Dr. Haroun." He acknowledged the Israeli diplomat. "Dr. Weiss, Mr. Garrett. Quite the gathering for an unconfirmed discovery, wouldn't you say?" "Professor Abrams," Dr. Haroun replied stiffly. "This is an official matter of cultural heritage recovery." "Is it?" Abrams questioned mildly. "Or is it the latest chapter in a 70-year effort to suppress manuscripts that challenge convenient historical narratives?" He turned to Noah. "Mr. Coleman, I'm Samuel Abrams, former head of ancient manuscript studies at the British Museum. Daniel contacted me about your discovery. May we speak privately?" Noah hesitated, unsure whom to trust in this rapidly escalating situation. The standoff was broken by Martha Hendricks, who had emerged from the house despite Edward's protective efforts. "Professor Abrams," she called out. "My father spoke of you." "Gregory Patterson." Recognition dawned in the professor's eyes. "Patterson's daughter? Then you know the full significance of what's at stake." "I do," Martha confirmed. "And my father trusted you with the truth decades ago." This exchange shifted the dynamic completely. Noah lowered his rifle slightly. "Everyone stays out here," he instructed firmly. "Professor Abrams, Mrs. Hendricks, Daniel, and my father will come inside. The rest of you can return in the morning during business hours and with proper identification." Despite protests from the assembled officials, Noah maintained his position. Eventually, faced with a resolute farmer on private property, they retreated to their vehicles, though Noah noticed they merely parked at the end of his long driveway rather than leaving completely. Inside the farmhouse kitchen, Professor Abrams examined Pastor Gregory's journal with reverent care while Martha prepared fresh tea. "I knew Gregory was hiding something significant," Abrams murmured. "But I never imagined he had secured the complete Yeshua Codex." "The what?" Noah asked, setting his rifle aside, but keeping it within reach. "The Yeshua Codex," Abrams repeated. "A collection of first-century manuscripts containing teachings and accounts that were deliberately excluded from canonical texts during the early formation of Christian doctrine. Scholars have theorized about their existence for centuries, but most believed they were destroyed during the religious purges of the 4th century. Daniel leaned forward intently. "The markings on the box, they're consistent with this codex?" "Unmistakably," Abrams confirmed. "I've seen similar script patterns on fragments in private collections, pieces that mysteriously disappear whenever they're brought to public attention." He looked up at Noah. "Mr. Coleman, you've stumbled upon what may be the most significant religious discovery since the original Dead Sea Scrolls, documents that could fundamentally reshape our understanding of early Christianity and its relationship to Judaism." Noah absorbed this information, feeling its weight pressing down on him. "Those people outside, they know what these scrolls contain." "Some do," Abrams acknowledged. "Others merely suspect. But all recognize that controlling such documents means controlling a narrative that has shaped civilization for 2 millennia. That's power beyond price." Edward, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "So what's the right thing to do here? We're simple farmers. We didn't ask to become guardians of religious history." Abrams smiled gently. "Few who change history ever asked for the responsibility, Mr. Coleman. Yet here you are, faced with a choice that will affect generations to come." Martha placed her father's journal on the table between them. "My father believed these texts belonged to humanity, not to any single institution or authority. He protected them during a time when their revelation might have led to violence and suppression. But he always hoped for a day when the world would be ready to confront challenging truths with wisdom rather than fear." Noah considered this, looking around at the unlikely council gathered in his farmhouse kitchen: a locksmith with a passion for ancient languages, an elderly biblical scholar, the daughter of a man who had safeguarded ancient secrets for decades, and his father, whose simple farmer's wisdom had guided Noah through every important decision of his life. "If we turn these scrolls over to any one of those groups outside," Noah reasoned aloud, "they'll control the narrative. They'll decide what gets revealed and what remains hidden." "Precisely," Abrams confirmed. "And history suggests such control rarely serves truth." "But if we try to protect them ourselves," Noah continued, "we become targets for people with resources and influence far beyond anything we can match." "They've already found us within days of our discovery," Daniel spoke up. "There's another option, one that ensures no single entity controls these texts while guaranteeing their preservation and study by qualified scholars." All eyes turned to him as he outlined a bold strategy that would transform their approach to the increasingly dangerous situation developing outside. By morning, The humble farmer who had spent $475 on a foreclosed church would implement a plan that would outmaneuver some of the most powerful institutions in the world, all while ensuring that ancient truths hidden for centuries would finally serve their intended purpose, illuminating rather than limiting human understanding. The following day dawned clear and cold, a perfect Midwestern autumn morning that belied the tension surrounding the Coleman farmhouse. True to Noah's expectations, the various interested parties had maintained their vigil at the end of his driveway, their vehicles now numbering 5, including a local police cruiser summoned by one of the officials claiming concerns about cultural heritage theft. But Noah and his unlikely allies had been busy through the night, implementing the strategy Daniel had proposed, a plan that would ensure the scrolls' protection while preventing any single authority from controlling their revelation to this world. By 9 a.m., Noah stood on his front porch, addressing the assembled representatives who had approached the house once more, now joined by Sheriff Wilson, a man who had known the Coleman family for 3 generations. "I understand you're all concerned about historical artifacts reportedly found at St. Matthew's Church," Noah began, his voice steady despite his lack of sleep. "I'm prepared to address those concerns transparently and responsibly." Dr. Haroun from the Israeli consulate stepped forward. "Mr. Coleman, under international conventions regarding cultural heritage, we formally request the surrender of any Dead Sea Scroll manuscripts for proper authentication and preservation by authorized experts." "Sheriff Wilson," Noah replied. Turning to the law enforcement officer, "Could you please confirm for everyone present the legal status of items found on privately owned property in this county?" The sheriff, a no-nonsense man who had little patience for outside interference in local matters, nodded firmly. "Under county and state law, Mr. Coleman legally owns any items found on property he has legally purchased, barring specific exclusions. In the sale contract, I've reviewed the foreclosure documents for St. Matthew's Church, and there were no such exclusions." This established, Noah continued, "However, I recognize the historical and cultural significance of what I've discovered. That's why, as of 7 a.m. this morning, I've taken the following steps." He produced a folder containing official documents. "First, I've established the Ridgewood Valley Historical Preservation Trust, with independent oversight from qualified scholars representing multiple religious and academic traditions. The manuscripts have been legally donated to this trust, with binding provisions preventing any single institution from claiming exclusive control." Dr. Weiss stepped forward, visibly alarmed. "Mr. Coleman, you can't simply." "Second," Noah continued, undeterred, "digital scanning and preservation of the manuscripts began at dawn under the supervision of Professor Samuel Abrams, former head of ancient manuscript studies at the British Museum, with multiple witnesses from different faith traditions present to ensure transparency." Jarrett from the supposed international agency moved toward his vehicle, already speaking urgently into his phone. Noah pressed on. "Third, complete high-resolution scans have already been transmitted to 7 different secure repositories around the world, with deadman switches ensuring their public release if any attempt is made to seize or suppress the original manuscripts." The assembled officials exchanged concerned glances, recognizing that their leverage was rapidly diminishing. Noah allowed this to sink in before delivering his final point. "And fourth, St. Matthew's Church is now officially registered as a historical landmark under state and federal preservation statutes, with the full support of the County Historical Society. Any attempt to remove historical artifacts from the site without proper authorization now constitutes a federal offense." Sheriff Wilson stepped forward. "I can confirm that all necessary paperwork has been properly filed and witnessed. Mr. Coleman has acted entirely within his legal rights, while taking extraordinary steps to ensure proper historical preservation." The diplomatic representative was the first to recover from this unexpected development. "Mr. Coleman, while your initiative is impressive, These manuscripts have international significance that transcends local jurisdiction. The State of Israel has legitimate interest in artifacts connected to its cultural heritage, which is precisely why the Ridgewood Valley Historical Preservation Trust includes 2 Israeli scholars, 1 Palestinian historian, and representatives from 3 different religious traditions, Noah countered smoothly. All documentation will be made available to legitimate researchers regardless of nationality or institutional affiliation. No single entity will control access or interpretation. As the implications of Noah's strategy became clear, the mood among the officials shifted from confident authority to reluctant recognition that they had been outmaneuvered. The manuscripts they had hoped to quietly acquire and potentially control were now secured in a legal framework specifically designed to prevent such control. Professor Abrams emerged from the farmhouse, his aged face bearing a satisfied expression. "The initial preservation work is complete," he announced. "And I must say, these are among the most remarkable manuscripts I've examined in 60 years of scholarship. Their authentication will require extensive study, but preliminary analysis confirms their age and potential significance." Noah watched as the various representatives processed this new reality. Some retreated to their vehicles for urgent consultations, while others approached Professor Abrams with professional inquiries, now that direct acquisition had become impossible. The confrontation had transformed into an impromptu scholarly conference on the Coleman family's front lawn. Martha Hendricks joined Noah on the porch, observing this transformation with quiet satisfaction. "My father would be proud," she said softly. "This is what he hoped for, not secrecy forever, but revelation at the right time, in the right way." Noah nodded, feeling a profound sense of purpose that transcended his original desperate financial gamble. "I still can't believe all this. Started because I needed $250 to save my farm." Martha smiled. "Sometimes the most important journeys begin with the humblest steps. My father believed these scrolls contained truths that could heal divisions between faiths rather than deepen them, but only if they were revealed with wisdom rather than wielded as weapons." As the morning progressed, the initial tension gave way to a more collaborative atmosphere. With control of the manuscripts secured through legal frameworks and technological safeguards, even the most resistant officials recognized that cooperation would serve their interests better than conflict. By midday, preliminary agreements were being drafted for scholarly access, preservation protocols, and eventual public exhibition of the manuscripts fall under the auspices of the newly formed Ridgewood Valley Historical Preservation Trust. Daniel Reeves approached Noah as these discussions continued. "Not bad for a farmer who just wanted to save his family land," he observed with a grin. "I had good advisors," Noah acknowledged, "but we're not finished yet. There's still the small matter of actually saving the farm." Daniel's smile widened. "We're just following the path that seemed right," Noah responded modestly. "Letting everyone see everything, bringing different perspectives together, making sure no single viewpoint dominates the interpretation. And therein lies wisdom that exceeds mere academic knowledge," Abrams observed. "You've created something unprecedented here, not just a research facility, but a model for how humanity might approach profound differences in understanding without resorting to divisiveness or suppression." Noah had never thought of their practical arrangements in such philosophical terms, but he recognized the truth in the professor's observation. From the beginning, they had insisted on diversity in the research team: Jews, Christians, Muslims, secular scholars, men and women from various nations and traditions, all working together with mutual respect, despite sometimes profound differences in perspective. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a group of international media representatives being guided through the facility as part of preparations for the grand opening celebration scheduled for the following week. Noah excused himself to join them, recognizing the importance of maintaining transparent communication about the ongoing research. "Mr. Coleman," called out a journalist from a major network, "how do you respond to claims from certain religious institutions that these texts should be studied privately before being shared with the general public?" Noah had fielded similar questions regularly since the discovery became public knowledge. "These manuscripts survived for nearly 2,000 years, he replied thoughtfully. "They contain perspectives that were nearly lost to history. We believe their insights belong to all humanity, not just to scholars or religious authorities. Everyone deserves the opportunity to consider their message directly." Another reporter pressed further. "But some religious leaders express concern that ordinary people might misinterpret complex theological content without proper guidance." "Perhaps," Noah acknowledged, "but these scrolls themselves seem to suggest that spiritual understanding isn't exclusively the domain of institutions or authorities. They repeatedly emphasize personal discernment and direct experience. We're simply honoring that principle in how we share them with the world." As the media tour continued toward the museum wing, Noah found himself reflecting on the philosophical journey that had accompanied the practical developments of the past 6 months. He had begun with the simple goal of saving his family farm and had discovered not only ancient manuscripts but also a profound calling, helping to facilitate humanity's engagement with challenging historical truths in ways that promoted understanding rather than division. Later that afternoon, Noah drove to the farmhouse where final preparations were underway for the reception that would follow the grand opening ceremony. The property, like the church, had undergone significant transformation, not into a museum, but into a living embodiment of the agricultural heritage that connected modern Ridgewood Valley to the ancient world reflected in the scrolls. The barn had been renovated to serve as a conference center where farmers and scholars could exchange insights about agricultural practices across millennia. Fields that had lain fallow during the financial crisis now demonstrated historical farming techniques alongside modern sustainable methods. What had nearly been lost to foreclosure had become a bridge between past and present, between practical wisdom and academic knowledge. Noah found his father in the orchard, showing Michael Lawson, Martha's grandson who had first encountered Noah as an intruder in his fort, how to properly prune young apple trees. The boy had become a regular presence on the farm, his natural curiosity about both farming and history making him an eager apprentice to both Noah and Edward. "Those branches won't bear fruit if they're competing with each other," Edward was explaining patiently. "Sometimes removing one path allows others to flourish." Noah smiled at the unintentional metaphor. So much of what they had learned from the scrolls echoed this fundamental wisdom, that sometimes established structures needed pruning to allow new understanding to flourish, that crowded doctrines could prevent the growth of direct spiritual insight. The evening brought an informal gathering of the core team that had transformed a humble farmer's desperate purchase into an international center for historical study. They assembled around the same kitchen table where, 6 months earlier, Noah had contemplated financial ruin while studying the church auction notice. Martha brought her famous apple pie, Daniel arrived with locally brewed beer, and Professor Abrams contributed fine wine from his personal collection. Thomas Hendricks and his construction crew joined them, along with Sheriff Wilson, whose early support had proved crucial in establishing the legal framework that protected the scrolls from institutional appropriation. As they shared a meal together, scholars and farmers, academics and tradespeople, united by their connection to an extraordinary discovery, Noah felt a profound sense of rightness in how everything had unfolded. What might have become a contentious battle for control of valuable artifacts had instead fostered unlikely friendships and collaborations across traditional boundaries. "A toast," Professor Abrams proposed, raising his glass, "to Noah Coleman, who reminds us that wisdom often comes from unexpected sources, and that sometimes the humblest beginnings yield the most profound transformations." Noah acknowledged the toast with characteristic modesty. "I just bought a church because I was desperate," he reminded them. "Everything that followed came from our collective efforts, not my individual insight." "Perhaps," Martha suggested thoughtfully, "that's precisely the point. My father protected these scrolls alone for decades, carrying a burden of secrecy that isolated him from his community. But their true purpose has been fulfilled through collaboration, through bringing different perspectives together rather than imposing a single viewpoint." Daniel nodded in agreement. The scrolls themselves emphasize community understanding over hierarchical authority. We've simply embodied that principle in how we've approached their study and presentation. As evening deepened into night, the conversation turned to the grand opening celebration planned for the following week. Representatives from major religious traditions, academic institutions, and media organizations would gather in Ridgewood Valley to witness the public unveiling of manuscripts that had remained hidden for nearly 2 millennia. "Are you nervous about addressing such a distinguished audience?" Thomas asked Noah, knowing that public speaking had never been the farmer's favorite activity. Noah considered the question thoughtfully. 6 months ago, I would have been terrified," he admitted. "But I've learned something important through this journey, that authenticity matters more than credentials, that speaking truthfully from direct experience carries its own authority." "Another lesson from the scrolls themselves," Professor Abrams noted appreciatively. The text repeatedly emphasized the value of personal testimony over institutional authority. As their guests gradually departed into the winter night, Noah and Edward stood on the farmhouse porch, watching snowflakes dance in the security lights that now illuminated the property. In the distance, St. Matthew's Church glowed softly against the darkness, its restored bell tower standing as a beacon visible for miles across the rural landscape. "Your grandfather would be proud," Edward said quietly. "Not just of saving the farm, but of what you've created here. A place where practical wisdom and scholarly knowledge meet as equals, where ancient truths and modern insights inform each other." Noah nodded, feeling the weight of his grandfather's legacy alongside the responsibility of stewarding the ancient manuscripts. "I still can't believe it all started with a desperate bid at a property auction. The best journeys often begin when we've run out of easy options," Edward observed. "Necessity stripped away your preconceptions about what was possible, allowing you to see opportunities others missed." The week that followed brought final preparations for the grand opening, security arrangements for distinguished visitors, media facilities for international coverage, and completion of the museum exhibits that would make the scroll's content accessible to visitors of all backgrounds. Noah found himself at the center of this whirlwind, somehow maintaining his farmer's practicality amid increasing public attention. On the morning of the ceremony, Noah rose before dawn as he had throughout his farming life. Before the day's public events began, he wanted private time to center himself in the familiar rhythms that had shaped his existence long before ancient manuscripts had transformed his circumstances. He walked the boundaries of the family property in the pre-dawn darkness, feeling the cold winter air fill his lungs as he traced the same paths his grandfather had walked decades earlier. The land remained his anchor, keeping him grounded amid the scholarly discussions and media attention that now filled his days. As the first light of dawn touched the eastern horizon, Noah made his way to St. Matthew's Church, entering the sanctuary. While it stood empty and silent, the restored altar, now a display platform for a carefully crafted replica of the original wooden table with its hidden compartment, stood illuminated by a single spotlight, the golden light reflecting off its polished surface. Noah approached slowly, remembering the moment 6 months earlier when he had first discovered the hidden keyhole that had unlocked not just a secret compartment, but a transformative journey for himself and his community. He placed his hand on the replica altar, feeling the craftsmanship that honored the original, while symbolizing the bridge between past and present that now defined his life's work. "I thought I might find you here," came Martha's voice from the sanctuary entrance. She joined him beside the altar, her presence a reminder of the generational guardianship that had preserved the scrolls until the world was ready to receive their message. "Just needed a quiet moment before the circus begins," Noah explained with a smile. Martha nodded understandingly. "My father used to come here early mornings too, to remind himself of the greater purpose behind his daily efforts." She gazed around the beautifully restored sanctuary. He would be amazed to see all this, not just the physical restoration, but the spirit of open inquiry that now fills this space. By mid-morning, the church and surrounding grounds had transformed into a gathering of remarkable diversity, religious leaders in traditional garments, alongside academics in formal attire, local farmers in practical work clothes next to media, representatives with sophisticated equipment. What united this unlikely assembly was shared interest in ancient wisdom that transcended modern divisions. Noah, dressed in a simple suit that respected the occasion while honoring his practical roots, welcomed visitors with natural warmth rather than rehearsed formality. Distinguished guests who had expected to meet an academic or religious figure found themselves conversing with a straightforward farmer whose unpretentious wisdom often cut through complex theoretical discussions to highlight practical applications of ancient insights. The formal ceremony began at noon, with Noah standing before the gathered assembly in the sanctuary. Cameras transmitted the proceedings to viewers around the world as he prepared to officially unveil the first public exhibition of manuscripts that had remained hidden for centuries. 6 months ago, Noah began, his voice steady despite the global audience. "I stood at a county property auction with $475 in my pocket and the desperate hope of saving my family farm. I had no idea that my impulsive bid on a foreclosed church would uncover ancient wisdom that had been waiting patiently to re-enter human consciousness." He gestured toward the gathered scholars, religious leaders, and community members. "The manuscripts we celebrate today contain many profound teachings, but perhaps their most powerful message lies in how they've brought us together. People of different faiths, different backgrounds, different perspectives, united in the search for understanding rather than divided by claims of exclusive truth." Noah paused, looking around at the restored sanctuary that now served as both sacred space and scholarly center. These ancient texts remind us that spiritual wisdom doesn't belong exclusively to institutions or authorities. They emphasize direct experience, personal discernment, and community dialogue over rigid hierarchies or controlled access to knowledge. As he officially declared the exhibition open, inviting the first visitors to enter the museum wing where carefully preserved fragments were displayed alongside multilingual translations and contextual information, Noah realized that his life had come full circle in unexpected ways. The desperate financial gamble that had led him to purchase St. Matthew's Church had not only saved his family's agricultural heritage but had connected that practical tradition to timeless spiritual questions about authority, authenticity, and direct experience. In the months and years that followed, the Ridgewood Valley Historical Preservation Trust would continue its unprecedented approach to studying and sharing the manuscripts, bringing together diverse perspectives, maintaining rigorous scholarly standards while ensuring public accessibility, and steadfastly refusing to allow any single tradition to claim exclusive interpretive authority. The economic impact on the region proved transformative as well. The once struggling farming community became a center for what journalists called spiritual tourism, thoughtful visitors seeking not entertainment but enlightenment, engaging with both ancient manuscripts and the agricultural wisdom that connected modern farming practices to biblical parables. Noah Coleman remained at the heart of this transformation, maintaining his identity as a farmer while embracing his unexpected role as steward of historical revelation. The simple practicality that had guided his desperate bid at a property auction continued to inform his approach to profound philosophical questions raised by the scrolls, cutting through academic complexity to highlight insights relevant to ordinary human experience. On a perfect spring morning 1 year after his fateful purchase, Noah stood in a field of newly planted wheat, watching as visitors moved between the farm and the church, experiencing the connection between agricultural practice and spiritual metaphor. His father approached, leaning less heavily on his cane than he had the previous year, his health improved by renewed purpose and reduced stress. "You know what amazes me most?" Edward remarked, gazing across the property that had nearly been lost to foreclosure. "Not the manuscripts themselves, remarkable as they are. It's how they've restored something essential that was being lost, the connection between practical wisdom and spiritual insight, between working the land and understanding deeper truths." Noah nodded, feeling the rich soil beneath his boots, the same soil his grandfather had tended through drought and prosperity. "Maybe that's why these scrolls were hidden here all along," he suggested. "Not in some grand cathedral or famous university, but in a simple country church surrounded by farmland, waiting for someone who could appreciate both their scholarly significance and their practical applications." As father and son surveyed the thriving farm that had so recently faced extinction, they embodied the living connection between ancient wisdom and contemporary challenges that now defined Ridgewood Valley. The humble farmer who had spent his last $475 on a foreclosed church had not only saved his family's legacy, but had helped unveil transformative insights that had waited patiently for centuries, hidden beneath a simple wooden altar for precisely the right moment to re-emerge into human consciousness. In discovering the scrolls, Noah Coleman had uncovered something even more valuable, a model for approaching profound differences with openness rather than dogmatism, for bringing diverse perspectives together in the search for understanding, and for recognizing that sometimes the most significant revelations come through the most ordinary circumstances. The desperate financial gamble that had led him to St. Matthew's Church had yielded dividends beyond calculation, not just for his family, but for a world hungry for wisdom that united rather than divided, illuminated rather than obscured, and served all humanity rather than just those who claimed authority. "We should head back," Noah said finally, noticing a tour group approaching from the direction of the church. "Professor Abrams is giving a presentation on agricultural metaphors in the newly translated parables. Might learn something useful for this season's planting." As they walked together towards St. Matthew's Church, now restored to its original beauty while serving an expanded purpose, the simple wooden cross atop its bell tower gleamed in the morning sunlight, a fitting symbol for how ancient faith and contemporary understanding had found harmony in the most unlikely of places, through the courage of a humble farmer who had taken a chance on a foreclosed church with his last $475. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.